Sarah Martinez pulled her car into the parking lot of Camp Pendleton Marine Base. Her hands shook slightly as she turned off the engine. After 3 years of waiting, she was finally here to watch her son Michael graduate from Marine training. The California sun beat down on her windshield as she checked her appearance in the mirror one last time. She had driven 12 hours straight from Phoenix, Arizona. The old Honda Civic wasn't the most comfortable car for such a long trip, but it was all she could afford. Working 2 jobs as a single mother didn't leave much room for luxury. Sarah worked days at a local diner and nights cleaning office buildings. Every penny she saved went towards supporting Michael through his decision to join the Marines. As she stepped out of the car, Sarah smoothed down her best dress. It was navy blue, simple but clean. She had bought it specifically for this day, even though it meant eating nothing but rice and beans for 2 weeks. This was the most important day in her son's life, and she wanted to look her best. The Marine base buzzed with activity. Families from all over the country had come to watch their loved ones graduate. Children ran around in their Sunday clothes while parents clutched programs and cameras. Sarah felt a mix of pride and nervousness. She had never been on a military base before. Walking toward the main building, Sarah noticed how everything looked so organized and clean. The buildings were painted in matching colors, and the grounds were perfectly maintained. It was so different from the rough neighborhood where she and Michael had lived for most of his childhood. Sarah thought back to the day Michael told her he wanted to join the Marines. She was working in the kitchen of the diner when he came in after school. His face was serious, more serious than she had ever seen it. He sat down at the counter and waited for a break. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important," he had said. Sarah remembered the fear that shot through her heart. In their neighborhood, when young men had serious conversations, it usually meant trouble. Gang recruitment was common, and she had worked so hard to keep Michael away from that life. But Michael surprised her. "I want to join the Marines, Mom. I want to serve my country and make something of myself." At first, Sarah was terrified. The idea of her only child going off to war, possibly getting hurt or killed, was almost too much to bear. But as Michael explained his reasons, she began to understand. He wanted structure in his life. He wanted to learn discipline and skills that would help him build a better future. Michael had always been a good kid, but growing up without a father had been hard on him. Sarah's ex-husband had left when Michael was only 5 years old. He said he wasn't ready for the responsibility of being a family man. Sarah never heard from him again. Raising Michael alone had been the hardest thing Sarah ever did. There were times when she worked so many hours that she barely saw him. She worried constantly about him getting involved with the wrong crowd. Their apartment was in a part of town where gunshots at night were common, and police sirens were like a lullaby. But Michael had stayed focused on school. His grades weren't perfect, but he graduated high school without getting into serious trouble. When he told Sarah about wanting to join the Marines, she realized it might be exactly what he needed. The recruitment process had been long and stressful. Michael had to take tests and physical exams. Sarah had to sign papers and attend meetings. The recruiters explained what military life would be like and what to expect during training. The hardest part was saying goodbye at the bus station. Michael looked so young in his civilian clothes, carrying a small bag with everything he owned. Sarah hugged him tight and tried not to cry. She knew this was his chance for a better life, but letting go was painful. For the past 3 months, Sarah had only been able to talk to Michael a few times. Military training kept the recruits busy from dawn until late at night. His letters were brief but positive. He wrote about learning to march, shoot, and work as part of a team. Each letter made Sarah proud, but also reminded her how much she missed him. Now, walking across the Marine base, Sarah felt overwhelmed by emotions. She was proud of Michael for making it through training. She was nervous about seeing him after so many months, and she was grateful that he had stayed safe and healthy. Sarah followed the signs toward the graduation ceremony area. Other families walked in the same direction, all dressed in their finest clothes. She overheard conversations about sons and daughters who were graduating. Some families had multiple generations of military service. Others, like Sarah, were experiencing this for the first time. The ceremony was being held on a large field with rows of chairs set up for families. Sarah found a seat near the middle and placed her purse in her lap. She pulled out the small camera she had borrowed from her neighbor. It was an older model, but she wanted to capture every moment of Michael's graduation. As she waited, Sarah noticed the diversity of families around her. There were grandparents who had traveled across the country, young wives with babies, and parents of all ages and backgrounds. Everyone shared the same expression of pride, mixed with emotion. A man in a Marine uniform walked to the front of the seating area and asked everyone to take their seats. Sarah's heart began beating faster. After months of waiting, she was finally going to see her son as a United States Marine. The ceremony began with the presentation of colors. Marines in dress uniforms marched onto the field carrying flags. The sight was impressive and moving. Sarah had seen military ceremonies on television, but witnessing one in person was completely different. Then came the moment she had been waiting for. The new Marines marched onto the field in perfect formation. Sarah scanned the rows of young men and women looking for Michael. They all looked so professional and confident in their uniforms. Finally, she spotted him. Michael stood in the third row, his back straight and his face focused. He looked older somehow, more mature than when she had last seen him. The awkward teenager was gone, replaced by a confident young man. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. Her little boy had become a Marine. All the years of struggle, all the sacrifices had led to this moment. She was so proud she could barely contain herself. As the ceremony continued, Sarah listened to speeches about duty, honor, and service. She watched as the new Marines received their certificates and insignia. When Michael's name was called, she stood and cheered louder than she ever had in her life. After the formal ceremony ended, there was time for families to meet with their graduated Marines. Sarah made her way through the crowd, looking for Michael. When she finally saw him approaching, she ran toward him. The hug they shared lasted several minutes. Michael looked handsome and confident in his uniform. He was taller than Sarah remembered, and his shoulders were broader from months of physical training. "I'm so proud of you," Sarah whispered in his ear. "I did this for both of us, Mom," Michael replied. "For our future." They talked for almost an hour, catching up on everything that had happened during their separation. Michael told her about his training, his new friends, and his plans for the future. Sarah told him about work and how she had counted down the days until his graduation. As they talked, Sarah noticed other Marines and their families around them. The joy and pride were universal. Young people who had been ordinary, everyone was friendly and welcoming. Sarah felt like she belonged to something bigger than herself, a community of people who understood the sacrifice and commitment of military service. As the afternoon wore on, Michael had to return to his barracks to prepare for his next assignment. Sarah knew their time together was limited, but she treasured every minute. "I have to go soon, Mom, but I want you to know something," Michael said. "Everything I've accomplished here is because of what you taught me. Your strength and determination inspired me to never give up." Sarah felt her heart swell with emotion. All the years of working multiple jobs, all the nights she had fallen asleep worried about their future, all the sacrifices she had made as a single mother had been worth it. As they prepared to say goodbye, Sarah rolled up her sleeve slightly to wipe her eyes. She didn't realize that this simple gesture would change everything that was about to happen. Hidden beneath her sleeve was a small tattoo that she had kept covered for years, a tattoo with a story that connected to someone else at the graduation ceremony. The sun was beginning to set over Camp Pendleton as families started to leave. Sarah hugged Michael one final time, promising to stay in touch and visit whenever possible. As she walked back toward the parking lot, she felt a sense of completion. Her son was now a Marine, ready to serve his country and build his own future. But her story at Camp Pendleton was far from over. As she made her way through the crowd of departing families, someone else was about to notice something that would bring the past rushing back into the present. Captain James Rodriguez had been assigned to oversee the graduation ceremony at Camp Pendleton. As a decorated Marine officer with 15 years of service, he had attended dozens of these ceremonies. Usually, they followed the same pattern. Families arrived, the ceremony proceeded smoothly, and everyone went home happy. But today felt different for James. As he watched the families celebrating with their newly graduated Marines, something nagged at his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening around him, though he couldn't identify what it was. James had grown up in Los Angeles, not far from Camp Pendleton. His father had been a Marine, and his grandfather before him. Military service was a family tradition that James had embraced proudly. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, earning commendations for his leadership and bravery. Despite his military success, James carried a deep personal pain that he had never fully resolved. 22 years ago, when he was just 18 years old, he had made a decision that haunted him every day since. Her name was Sarah Martinez, and she had been the love of his young life. They had met in high school in Los Angeles. Sarah was beautiful, smart, and kind. James was the star of the football team and planned to join the Marines after graduation. They had dreamed of a future together, but life had other plans. During their senior year, Sarah became pregnant. They were both just 17 years old, scared, and unprepared for parenthood. Their families had very different reactions to the news. James's father was furious. He had already arranged for James to enter the Marines immediately after high school graduation. The elder Rodriguez believed that military service would make his son a man and set him up for a successful career. A teenage pregnancy threatened to derail all those plans. Sarah's mother was heartbroken, but supportive. She had been a single mother herself and knew how difficult it would be for Sarah to raise a child alone. But she promised to help however she could. The pressure from James's family was intense. His father gave him an ultimatum: choose the Marines and his future, or choose Sarah and the baby and lose his family's support forever. At 18 years old, James felt overwhelmed by the weight of such a decision. The night before he was supposed to leave for Marine training, James and Sarah met at their favorite spot overlooking the city. They had spent many evenings there, talking about their dreams and planning their future together. "I don't know what to do," James had said, his voice breaking. "My father says if I don't go, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Sarah took his hand. "And what do you say?" "I say I love you, and I want to be here for you, and the baby," James replied. "But I'm scared. What if I can't provide for us? What if I'm not good enough to be a father?" They talked until dawn, weighing their options. Sarah never tried to pressure James to stay. She knew that military service meant everything to his family, and that he had genuine concerns about being able to support them. In the end, James made a decision that would haunt him forever. He chose to leave for Marine training, promising Sarah that he would come back for her and the baby after completing his initial service. But life doesn't always work according to plans made by 18-year-olds. Marine training was more intense than James had expected. By the time he finished his initial training and was able to return to Los Angeles, Sarah was gone. Her mother told James that Sarah had moved away to start fresh somewhere else. She was planning to raise the baby as a single mother and didn't want James to feel obligated to return. Sarah had left no forwarding address and asked that James not try to find her. James was devastated. He had spent months planning how he would return and propose to Sarah properly. He had saved money and even bought a ring. But she was gone, along with his child, who he had never even met. The pain of losing Sarah and their child motivated James to throw himself completely into his Marine career. He volunteered for the most challenging assignments and pushed himself to excel in every area. His commanders noticed his dedication and promoted him rapidly. But no amount of professional success could fill the hole in James's heart. Over the years, he had tried to find Sarah and their child. He hired private investigators and searched social media. But Sarah seemed to have disappeared completely. James often wondered about his child. Was it a boy or girl? Did they look like him or Sarah? Were they healthy and happy? Did they know they had a father who thought about them every day? As Captain Rodriguez, James had mentored hundreds of young Marines. He always found himself looking for some sign of his child among the recruits. Was his son or daughter serving in the military too? The math worked out right. His child would be 21 years old now, exactly the right age to be joining the service. Standing on the graduation field at Camp Pendleton, James felt that familiar ache of wondering about his lost family. He watched the joyful reunions between Marines and their families and wished desperately that he could have that experience with his own child. As the ceremony wound down and families began to leave, James performed his usual duties of ensuring everything proceeded smoothly. He walked through the crowd, checking that Marines were following proper procedures and that families had all the information they needed. That's when he saw her. A woman in a navy blue dress was hugging a newly graduated Marine. From a distance, she looked familiar, but James couldn't place her. As he got closer, his heart began to beat faster. The woman had dark hair and a graceful way of moving that reminded him of someone from his past. When the woman turned slightly, James saw her profile clearly for the first time. His breath caught in his throat. It was Sarah Martinez. After 22 years, the love of his life was standing 50 feet away from him. James felt dizzy. Sarah looked older, of course, but she was still beautiful. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, and there were small lines around her eyes, but her smile was exactly the same. The young Marine she was hugging had to be their son. James studied the young man's face, looking for familiar features. He was tall, like James, with Sarah's dark eyes and gentle expression. The resemblance was unmistakable. James wanted to run to them immediately, but his training kept him in place. He needed to think this through carefully. Sarah had made it clear 22 years ago that she didn't want him to find her. Why did he have to disrupt her life now? But as he watched Sarah interact with her son, James felt an overwhelming need to connect with them. This was his family, the family he had lost when he was too young and scared to fight for them. James moved closer, trying to overhear their conversation. He learned that the young Marine's name was Michael and that Sarah had driven from Arizona for the graduation. They talked about Michael's future assignments and Sarah's work back home. Listening to them, James realized how much he had missed. Sarah had raised their son alone, just as her mother had raised her. She had worked hard to support Michael and guide him to this moment of achievement. James felt a mixture of pride and regret. Pride that his son had chosen to become a Marine, following in the family tradition. Regret that he had missed 21 years of Michael's life and hadn't been there to support Sarah through all the challenges of single parenthood. As James wrestled with whether to approach them, Sarah did something that made his decision for him. She rolled up her sleeve slightly to wipe her eyes, and James saw something that made his heart stop. There, on Sarah's forearm, was a small tattoo. It was a Marine Corps eagle, globe, and anchor symbol with the date of James's graduation from boot camp underneath. Below that, in small script, were the words, "Always faithful." James remembered the day Sarah got that tattoo. It was 2 weeks before he left for Marine training. They had gone together to a small tattoo parlor in East Los Angeles. Sarah wanted something to remember him by, something that would connect them even when they were apart. James had tried to talk her out of it, saying that tattoos were permanent and she might regret it later. But Sarah was determined. She said she wanted to carry a piece of him with her always. Seeing that tattoo now, 22 years later, James realized that Sarah had never forgotten him. Despite everything that had happened, despite raising their child alone, she had kept that symbol of their love on her body all these years. The sight of the tattoo gave James the courage he needed. This wasn't about disrupting Sarah's life or inserting himself where he wasn't wanted. This was about acknowledging the family they had created together and finding out if there was still a place for him in their lives. James approached slowly, his heart pounding. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind thousands of times over the years, but Now that it was happening, he couldn't remember a single word he had planned to say. When he was about 10 feet away, Sarah sensed someone approaching and turned around. Their eyes met for the first time in 22 years. Sarah's face went completely white, and she gripped Michael's arm for support. "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hello, Sarah," James replied, his own voice shaking. Michael looked back and forth between his mother and the Marine captain standing before them. He could sense the tension, but didn't understand what was happening. "Mom, do you know Captain Rodriguez?" Michael asked. Sarah stared at James, unable to speak. Tears began forming in her eyes. The carefully constructed life she had built was suddenly colliding with the past she had tried so hard to leave behind. James looked at Michael, his son, standing there in his Marine dress blues. "I'm your father," he said simply. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Michael's face showed confusion, then shock, then something approaching anger. "My father left before I was born," Michael said coldly. "My mother raised me alone." "That's not exactly true," James said, looking at Sarah. "It's complicated, and there's a lot you don't know." Sarah finally found her voice. "James, what are you doing here?" "I've been stationed here for 3 years," James replied. "I'm the officer in charge of graduation ceremonies." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. After 22 years of separation, they'd been brought together by the very institution that had torn them apart in the first place. "We need to talk," Sarah said quietly. James nodded. "Yes, we do. All 3 of us." Michael looked like he was still processing everything. "So you're telling me that the captain who's been running this ceremony is my father? The father who abandoned us?" "Michael," Sarah said gently, "it's not that simple. There's a lot about your father and our situation that I never told you." "Well, maybe it's time I heard the truth," Michael said, his voice rising slightly. James could see that his son was angry, and he couldn't blame him. From Michael's perspective, James was the man who had abandoned his pregnant girlfriend and left her to struggle alone. "You're right to be angry," James said, "but please give me a chance to explain. There's more to this story than you know." People around them were beginning to notice the emotional scene playing out. Other Marine families were looking in their direction, sensing drama, but not understanding what was happening. "Not here," Sarah said. "Too many people are watching." James nodded. "There's a quiet area behind the main building. We can talk there privately." As they walked toward the secluded area, Sarah's mind raced. She had imagined this moment many times over the years, but never thought it would actually happen. She had questions, accusations, and feelings that she had buried for 2 decades suddenly rising to the surface. Michael walked slightly ahead of them, his body language showing his confusion and anger. Sarah could see that this was going to be one of the most difficult conversations of all their lives. But, as painful as it might be, Sarah knew it was time for the truth to come out. James was here, Michael deserved to know his father, and maybe after 22 years, they could finally find some kind of peace. The 3 of them sat on a bench behind the main administration building at Camp Pendleton. The area was quiet, with only the distant sounds of military activities and the California breeze rustling through the palm trees. Sarah sat in the middle, with Michael on her right and James on her left. The tension between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. Michael broke the silence first. "So, are you going to tell me what really happened? Because I've spent 21 years believing that my father was a deadbeat who ran away when things got tough." Sarah winced at her son's harsh words, but she knew he deserved the truth. "Michael, I need you to understand that what happened between your father and me was complicated. We were both just kids, and we made the best decisions we could with the information we had at the time." James shifted uncomfortably. "Sarah, I want to tell him my side of the story, but I also want to respect how you've chosen to handle things all these years." "No," Sarah said firmly. "No more secrets. Michael deserves to know everything." She turned to face her son. "Your father didn't abandon us, Michael. I told him to stay away." Michael's expression changed from anger to confusion. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "When I found out I was pregnant, we were both scared. Your father wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to marry me and try to make it work. But his family was pressuring him to join the Marines, and my family was worried that if he stayed, both of our futures would be ruined. She looked at James, her eyes filling with tears. We were both 17 years old, Michael. We thought we knew what love was, but we were just children ourselves. James spoke up. I want you to know, Michael, that leaving was the hardest thing I ever did. I loved your mother, and I would have loved you. But everyone was telling us that staying together would be a mistake. So you just left? Michael asked, his voice still showing hurt. It wasn't that simple, Sarah continued. Your father and I made an agreement. He would go to Marine training, and I would move away to have you. We thought it would give us both a chance to grow up and figure out what we really wanted. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out an old envelope, yellowed with age. He wrote to me, Michael. For the first 6 months after you were born, your father wrote me letters every week. James looked surprised. You kept them? I kept everything, Sarah said softly. She handed the envelope to Michael. These are all the letters your father sent me after you were born. Michael opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of letters written on Marine Corps stationery. He opened one at random and began reading aloud. Dear Sarah, I hope you and the baby are healthy and safe. I think about you both every day. Training is hard, but knowing that I'm working to build a future for our family keeps me going. I've saved almost all of my pay, and when I finish training, I want to come home and marry you properly. I love you both more than words can express. Always yours, James. Michael looked up at his mother, then at James. If you were writing letters like this, what happened? Why didn't you come back? Sarah's voice broke as she continued the story. After you were born, everything changed for me. I was overwhelmed and exhausted. My mother was helping, but raising a baby alone was harder than I had imagined. I was scared that if your father came back, he would resent us for derailing his military career. She wiped tears from her eyes. So I wrote him one final letter. I told him that I was grateful for everything he had done, but that I wanted him to focus on his career and his future. I told him not to contact us again. James reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn piece of paper. I still carry that letter with me, he said quietly. It's the most painful thing I've ever read, but I wanted to remember what you said. He unfolded the letter and read, James, I know you feel obligated to come back for us, but I don't want you to sacrifice your dreams for a mistake we made as teenagers. You have a chance to build an amazing life in the Marines. Please take it. Don't contact us again. We'll be fine on our own. Michael stared at his parents. So both of you just gave up? You loved each other, but you let fear make your decisions? We thought we were doing the right thing, Sarah said. I thought I was setting your father free to build the life he deserved. And I thought I was protecting you from having a father who might resent the way his life turned out. James shook his head. But I never would have resented you, Sarah. Either of you. Yes, becoming parents at 18 would have been challenging, but we could have made it work. Could we have? Sarah asked. James, you've had an incredible career in the Marines. You're a captain now. You've served your country with honor. Would any of that have happened if you had stayed with us? Maybe not in exactly the same way, James admitted. But I would have had something much more valuable. I would have had a family. Michael set the letters down on the bench between them. So for 21 years, I grew up thinking my father didn't want me. And for 21 years, my father has been wondering if he had a son or daughter somewhere out there. Both Sarah and James nodded, unable to speak. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Michael said bluntly. You're both intelligent people, but you made a decision based on fear instead of love, and all three of us have paid the price. His words stung, but both Sarah and James knew he was right. Michael, James said carefully, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but I want you to know that not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you and wondered what kind of person you were becoming. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photo album. I may not have been there for your childhood, but I tried to imagine what it might have been like. James opened the album, revealing photos he had collected over the years. There were pictures of little league games, school plays, birthday parties, and Christmas mornings. None of the photos were of Michael, but they represented all the moments James had imagined sharing with his son. I bought birthday presents for you every year, James continued. I donated them to children's charities, but I wanted to mark the day somehow. I imagined teaching you to throw a football, helping you with homework, and watching you grow into a man. Michael flipped through the album, seeing his father's attempt to stay connected to a child he had never met. "This is really sad, Dad," he said quietly. It was the first time Michael had called James Dad, and the word hit both men like a physical blow. "I know it is," James replied. "I've lived with this regret every day for 21 years. Sarah reached over and took James's hand. "I've lived with regret too. There were so many times I wanted to find you and tell you about Michael. When he took his first steps, when he said his first word, when he graduated from high school. I wanted you to share those moments with us. Why didn't you?" James asked. "Pride, I guess. And fear. I was afraid that too much time had passed, that you had moved on and built a new life. I was afraid that you might not want to disrupt your career for a family you barely remembered." James shook his head. "Sarah, I never moved on. I never got married, never had other children. I kept hoping that somehow, someday, I would find you and Michael and have a chance to be part of your lives." Michael listened to his parents talking and began to understand the depth of pain they had both carried for so many years. "So what happens now?" he asked. The question hung in the air. After 21 years of separation, none of them were sure how to move forward. "That depends on what you both want," James said. "Michael, I know I have no right to expect anything from you. I wasn't there when you needed a father, even though the circumstances were complicated. But if you're willing, I would love to get to know you and try to be part of your life." Michael looked at his mother. "Mom, what do you want?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I want our family to have a chance to heal. I want you to know your father, and I want your father to know the amazing man you've become. Beyond that, I don't know. 21 years is a long time." James nodded. "I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, Sarah. We're different people now. But I would like the chance to get to know both of you and see if we can build something new together." Michael stood up and walked a few steps away, processing everything he had learned. When he turned back to his parents, his expression was serious, but not angry. "Here's what I think," he said. "I think you both made mistakes when you were kids, but your intentions were good. I think I grew up without a father, but I had an amazing mother who did everything she could to raise me right. And I think my father spent 21 years regretting a decision that seemed right at the time, but turned out to be wrong." He sat back down on the bench. "I also think that we're all Marines now, or connected to Marines, and Marines don't give up on their families." Sarah and James exchanged glances, surprised by their son's maturity and wisdom. "So here's my proposal," Michael continued. "We start over. Not as the people we were 21 years ago, but as the people we are now. Dad, you get to know me as an adult, not as the child you missed raising. Mom, you get to decide if you want to give Dad another chance, based on who he is now, not who he was when he was 18. He looked at both of them. And I get to have a father for the first time in my life, even if it took 21 years for us to find each other." James felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Michael, I would like that very much." Sarah nodded. "I think that's a good plan. But," Michael added, "we do this slowly. We get to know each other gradually. No pressure, no expectations, just three people figuring out how to be a family." Over the next hour, they talked about practical matters. James was stationed at Camp Pendleton for at least 2 more years. Sarah lived in Arizona, but could visit occasionally. Michael would be assigned to various bases as his Marine career progressed. They exchanged phone numbers and email addresses. They made plans for James to visit Arizona in a few weeks and for Sarah and Michael to have dinner with James the next time they were in California. As the sun began to set over Camp Pendleton, the three of them walked back toward the parking lot together. Sarah noticed that they looked like a family for the first time. Michael was tall and confident in his Marine uniform. James was distinguished in his captain's insignia, and she walked between them feeling hopeful about the future. "I have one more thing to show you," Sarah said as they reached her car. She rolled up her sleeve completely, revealing the Marine Corps tattoo that had started this entire reunion. "I got this tattoo the week before your father left for training," she told Michael. "Even when I told him not to contact us, even when I thought we would never see each other again, I kept this symbol of our love and his service." James traced the outline of the tattoo gently. "You kept it all these years." "I kept a lot of things," Sarah said, "including hope that someday we might find our way back to each other." As they prepared to say goodbye, Michael hugged both of his parents. "I'm proud to be your son," he told James. "And I'm proud of the life you built for us," he told Sarah. James and Sarah looked at each other, seeing glimpses of the young couple they had once been, but also recognizing the strong, mature adults they had become. "We're going to make this work," James said. "All three of us." Sarah nodded. "We have a lot of time to make up for, but we also have the rest of our lives to get it right." As Sarah and Michael drove away from Camp Pendleton, James watched until their car disappeared from view. For the first time in 21 years, he felt complete. He had found his family, and while the path ahead wouldn't be easy, they were committed to building a future together. The tattoo that had revealed their past had also opened the door to their future. 3 Marines, 3 generations, finally, united as the family they were always meant to be.